Go the Distance, Chapter 9, Do or Die. Years earlier. Adrift. That's how Meg would have later described the years after her mother died. She was a ship lost at sea with nowhere to anchor, drifting from town to town, never staying in one place for too long. Her reasons for being nomadic weren't the same as her mother's had been. No, Meg found herself moving on any time she noticed something that reminded her of her old life with Thea. It could be a song being hummed by a woman doing the wash, or the way a little small girl with red hair called for her parents, or even the sight of fresh flowers in the market. But when Meg felt that pull, she couldn't stay a minute longer. She ran from her mother's ghost until she could run no farther, taking only one thing from her old life on her travels, the rusty flute Thea had given her. She played that flute till her fingers calloused and bled. She poured her pain and her grief into song, creating melodies that she played at dawn, midday, and in the middle of the night. The skill she had once turned her nose up at, because it had cost her a week's worth of eggs, suddenly became her most cherished possession. And it turned out her mother was right about one thing. Music saved her. Meg was not one to take the handouts or rely on the kindness of strangers. No, her mother had warned her about living life that way. Instead, she used music to afford rent and food. With age and talent, Meg found herself getting more and more invitations to play her flute at performances with other musicians. It was at one of those concerts she met Aggius. "You have a gift," she recalled him saying to her one evening as she walked off the amphitheater stage. "And a gift like that shouldn't be wasted playing alone. Play with me instead." Meg remembered being ruffled by his words. She'd seen him earlier that evening. He played the lute like no other musician she'd ever seen, and she couldn't help being taken aback by his thick, black hair and his green eyes that shone against his tan skin. "Kind of forward, don't you think, Curly?" He half smiled. "I had to say something to keep you from getting away." He held a hand out. "My name is Aggius." She hesitated for a moment before shaking it. "Megara." The minute her fingers connected with his, she was adrift no more. For the first time since Thea had passed, Meg found herself opening up to another. It had been so long since she shared someone else's company for any length of time that she had almost forgotten what it was like to connect with another human. It wasn't long before they were playing music together on stage, and she found herself falling in love despite her better judgment. Her mother had said to never put her faith or trust in another, and here she was making future plans with a man she barely knew. But Aggius wasn't like the father from their faint memories. He never raised his voice, and he'd only seen him cross once, when a merchant refused to pay him for a performance he had requested. Life with Aggius was easy, and it didn't hurt that she now had someone to create music with. "Your skills make me feel like an imposter," Meg lamented one night. Aggius had played her under the table with a fast-paced arrangement on his lute, and she wasn't happy. "You sell yourself short," Aggius told her. "You're good." "I'm decent." "You're masterful." "I'm your apprentice," she argued, as she nuzzled into his chest in front of the fire he had made for them. "Don't say that." Aggius ran a hand through her hair. "You don't become a master by acting like an apprentice," Meg finished. It was one of his favorite sayings. "I know." Aggius picked up the lute again, and his fingers plucked the strings so quickly. It seemed as if the instrument played itself. "You're self-made, Megara. You've never had a single lesson. Talent like that is a gift from the muses. Who knows, someday your skill may put Cerberus to sleep." "And why would I ever need to learn how to put Cerberus to sleep?" she had said with a laugh. "Orpheus did," Aggius reminded her. "When his beloved Eurydice died, he played so beautifully he tricked Cerberus into letting a mortal enter the underworld to retrieve her soul." He reached out a hand and caressed her cheek. "If there ever comes a time when I have to do the same, my love, I, for one, will play like a master and sail by Cerberus as he sleeps to come find you." She cups his face in her hands. "And I would do the same for you." Aggius had mended her broken heart. What more could she ask for in life? She knew that soon he would ask for her hand in marriage. He hinted at it daily, and without question she would say yes. Would her mother approve of the marriage, of her putting her trust in another? Probably not, But her mother wasn't always right, was she? Aegeus would never betray her. Though, of course, the rest of the world might. One day, Aegeus fell gravely ill. Meg tried to get help, but she didn't have the funds for pricey herbs. She went to their fellow musicians, but they turned her away. If he's sick, that's punishment from the gods, several said with a jealous tinge in their voices. They had never liked that Aegeus had outshone them on stage. And if he gets well, that is a gift from the gods? She argued angrily. But she didn't wait around for their answer. Why would the gods punish Aegeus? He had done nothing but bring her joy and offer beautiful, moving music to the world. Despite her argument, she began to pray to every god she could think of to heal him, and yet Aegeus grew sicker. As he lay in bed, struggling for every breath, Meg found herself thinking of her mother. "I told you," she'd say. "No one would help you. People are no good. You can't trust others." "But Aegeus is good," she'd tell the voice in her head. "He deserves to live. I need him. Please, God, save him." But Aegeus's condition only worsened. "Perhaps I am praying to the wrong god," Meg feared one night when she thought Aegeus was about to take his last breath. Their friends had abandoned them. Money for treatments had eluded them, and no aid came. But maybe there was another way. Cerberus, she mused, thinking of the underworld. Her thoughts had turned dark, and the path of darkness led to none other than the god of the underworld. She placed her lips to her flute and played for her most cherished tune, The Plight of the Lily, in his honor. "Hades," Meg silently prayed as she played. "If you save my love's life, I will give you everything, anything you ask for. Just don't take Aegeus too soon, as you did my mother. I'll give you anything." "Anything?" a voice inside her head asked. Meg looked up and stopped playing. Was this voice in her head, or had a god fully answered her prayers? "Anything," Meg repeated, this time aloud. She held tight to Aegeus's hand to stop her from shaking. "Including your soul?" the voice said. Meg looked down at Aegeus, so weak and pale she knew he wouldn't last the night. She loved him like she'd loved no other. He'd given her so much these past few months, a companion, inspiration, a home. She couldn't imagine walking the earth without him. "Yes," Meg said firmly. It was the last word she spoke before she suddenly felt her body begin to fade from Aegeus's bedside. She reached out to grab Aegeus's hand, but felt it slip through her fingers. Her flute clattered to the floor. "Wait, wait," she begged when she realized what was happening. "I'm not ready to go." She didn't even have time to see Aegeus open his eyes. She was falling, fast into a never-ending darkness that made her scream die out before she hit the bottom. Her body went from cold to brutally hot. Her lungs felt like they were on fire, and she was sure her skin would begin to melt. But instead she kept falling until she finally hit solid ground and felt dirt beneath her fingers. The breath knocked from her stomach. Meg inhaled sharply, gasping for air. She sat up fast and looked around. "Aegeus! Aegeus, where are you?" she cried, her voice echoing in the darkness. But there was no answer. She blinked rapidly as her eyes adjusted. She was in a cave that glowed by torchlight. The air was thick and unbearably warm, and she could hear screaming in the distance. Suddenly, 3 hooded figures appeared out of the darkness, and Meg screamed once more, trying to retreat further into the darkness. "Are you sure this is her?" croaked a tall, grayish being with empty eye sockets. She had a pointed chin and nose and long, spindly fingers. She held a pair of scissors poised against a string 2 others were holding taut. "Because if it's not," snip, snip, said her short, squat companion. This one bore a pinkish skin tone and had a single eyeball in the center of her head. "Every soul must be accounted for," said the third, who had empty eye sockets and a nose twice the length of her face. "Who are you?" Meg cried. "Where is Aegeus?" But there was no answer. "You can back off, ladies," said a deep voice in the shadows. "This one is mine." A god with a flaming blue head and hollow, deep-set eyes stepped forward. He smiled, revealing his razor-sharp teeth. "Hello, my middle Meglet. Glad you could make it." "Hades." Meg whispered. In the flesh, Hades bowed. And hey, so are you, for the time being. This shouldn't have been possible. She'd made a deal with the devil, and he'd come to collect. Meg worried she was going to pass out. She was in the underworld, and Aegeus was back on Earth dying. Aegeus! Aegeus! Meg shouted, feeling her way around the rock, looking for an opening so she could run straight for Cerberus and play her way out of here. Except she felt around, panicked. The flute was not with her. She had left it behind with, Aegeus! He can't hear you from down here. No one can. Hades folded his gray hands. Well, except me. So you can cut it out. I'm not used to souls being all alive and stuff when they get here. That was your choice, croaked the one with the pointy nose. Who are you? Meg cried. Meg, meet the Fates. Fates, meet Meg, Hades said. She's going to be working for me for a while, as long as she behaves. Otherwise, it's as they said. He made a cutting motion. Snip, snip. The Fates. Meg backed away again, her backside hitting cold rock. The Fates not only knew all, they had decided all, and they were currently holding her life, literally, in their claw-like hands. But if you do as promised, all will be fine. Great, superb, Hades said as he took Meg's string from them and pocketed it. The Fates shuffled out of the room. Don't worry, Aegeus's thread stays intact. He clapped. Yay, you got what you wanted. Your guy lives. Meg's heart was beating so fast she thought it would stop. Aegeus is okay? He's going to live? Yes, and so will you. Technically and all that. It's kind of a sticky situation. Hades waved his hand around, and she noticed it turned into a stream of smoke. Mortals aren't supposed to be in the underworld, against the rules and all that, which is why the Fates are all up in arms and whatnot, but I can't do what I have to do on my own from down here. His eyes yellowed as he approached her. I need someone up on Earth to do a bit of housekeeping, as it were. Big things are happening. Huge. It's exciting times down here in the underworld. He paused, staring at her expectantly. Don't you want to know why? Meg met his gaze, but said nothing. Her thoughts flew about wildly as she tried to comprehend what was happening. She was in the underworld. She was in the underworld. She was in the underworld. Okay, stop meddling me for dirt. You're embarrassing yourself. If you must know, I've got some business coming up with the Titans. They're making a comeback. Hopefully, and if it all goes right, I'll be getting a promotion. We can save the details for later. The point is, I'm giving you a job. Earth? Job? So I'm alive? Meg repeated, unsure. Aegeus, I have to get back to Aegeus. Alive, yes. Can you see your guy at the moment? No. Hades' face darkened. Your soul belongs to me, remember? Meg wiped the sweat from her brow. She was so hot she couldn't stand it. But I'm alive, which means I can't stay here, right? Hades powered over her in seconds in a haze and whispered in her ear. Technically, if someone finds out a mortal was here, things could get a bit dicey for me, but you're not going to tell anyone, are we? His smile faded. Wouldn't want anything to happen to Aegeus before you can repay your debt. That would be a real shame, especially after I just saved his life. So, we're all copiatic. Anyway, I'm sending you topside to work, which means you will indeed get out of here. Topside? Earth? The land of the living? Aegeus? Her next words stumbled out of her. I'll do whatever you want to pay off my debts. Anything. I'll start right now. Please, I just want to go home. Meg hated how pathetic she sounded. Hades looked at her. Not that I don't admire the work ethic, but are you sure you even want to go back to this guy? He whirled his hands around and shot smoke toward a fireplace. She hadn't noticed in the corner, an image appearing in the sudden fire. Looks like he's back in the market already. Aegeus! Meg rushed toward the blue flames, then quickly took a few steps back as the heat sent a shock through her system. She stood, holding her arms, and found that through the flames she could see an image as clear as day. There was her love rushing through the marketplace in their village. He looked well. A sob escaped her lips. Aegeus was all right. Hades had saved him. Wait, Meg realized. How can he be in the market? It's the middle of the night. She peered closer. Is it daytime already? Hades shot smoke in the flames and the image disappeared. Yep, time travels fast down here. You want that boy to remember you. You better get a move on. And so, Meg went to work for the god of the underworld. The days marched on as she met with the nastiest of creatures all over Greece, creatures that usually never showed their faces in the light. She negotiated with river gods and harpies, a Nemean lion and a minotaur, convincing them to join Hades in his quest to topple old Zeus, and she didn't feel bad about what she was doing. It wasn't Zeus who had come to her aid to save Aegeus, it was Hades. And besides, one more deed for the god down meant that she was one step closer to returning to her old life and to her love. When she'd counted 7 days in his service, Hades congratulated her. A week together, my little Meg, he'd said, throwing an arm around her. And what a week it's been. You're good at your job, Meggie. You managed to get 5 new allies on our team this week. Yeah, Meg grumbled, turning away from him. And I almost gotten eaten by one. The Minotaur? Nah, he's harmless. Just wanted to scare you. But, you've performed far better than I thought you would, so I got you something. He reached behind his back, and though the smoke, he saw something familiar floating toward her. My flute, Meg said in surprise, reaching out to grab the precious instrument. She clutched it to her chest and forced herself not to tear up. She wouldn't give Hades the satisfaction of knowing how much this meant to her. It would just be another thing for him to lord over her. But how? Hades shrugged. God of the underworld, remember? I have my ways. I have to say, it's not much to look at, though. Rusty old thing. Meg stared at it. It holds a lot of memories. Oh, dear mummy, huh? Hades asked. Meg froze. She looked up at him, a wild idea popping into her head, one she couldn't believe she hadn't thought of before. Please. Nope, can't see her, sorry. Not good for her and not good for you. I placed a veil as soon as you arrived so she wouldn't hear anything about your comings and goings. Meg started to protest, and Hades held up a long hand. You have to concentrate, and Thea will just distract you. Besides, the residents would get witchy if they knew there was a mortal staying among them. Unless... He sidled up next to her. If you wanted to stay for good, then maybe I could arrange a reunion. No, you said I paid my debt. I could blow this joint. Meg's scowl returned, as she seemed to do more often than not in the underworld. Unless you want a certain someone to know I'm here, she threatened. I haven't prayed to any gods as of late. That was about the only thing she could use against the guy. No, I know. You want to get back to your love, he said, talking fast as he did. You miss him. He misses you, or at least he did, till he met her. Meg whirled around fast, her heart almost leaping into her throat. What her? Oh, it's no big deal, Hades shrugged. I shouldn't have even mentioned it. Hey, should we go over your schedule for tomorrow? I need you to go see a griffin. What? Her? Meg repeated slowly, and the god looked sheepish. Hades. Okay, I wasn't going to say anything, because I know you've been through hell and back, literally. But, there's been a development with your boy. Hades motioned to the fire, and a new image appeared. Meg walked over, flute in her hand. Aegeus was standing near the ocean, his arms wrapped around a woman with long blonde hair. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but they were talking closely as he nuzzled his cheek close to hers. The woman planted a kiss on his lips. Meg felt bile rise in her throat. No, this is your trickery. Aegeus loves me. He was going to ask me to marry him before he became sick. You're just trying to make me crazy. Hades looked forlorn. Meg, I may be a lot of things. A bad guy, a cheat, a scoundrel, and the leader of the underworld. But what I'm not is a magician. This is real. He pointed to the blue flames again, and Meg watched in despair as Aegeus lifted the woman in his arms and spun her around. The two of them were laughing. I hate to tell you this, but the world is a cruel place. Didn't your mother ever tell you that? Yes, Meg thought miserably. You can't trust people, because they will always let you down. Aggius has moved on, my little nutmeg. He's a guy. They can't stand being alone. It's in their nature. In that moment, Meg knew Hades was right. This was no witchcraft. Aggius didn't love her. If he had, he wouldn't have moved on to another woman a week after she sacrificed everything to save him. 1 week. Look, I know it hurts. You gave up on your soul for the guy, and this is how he repays you. Ouch. But this guy isn't worth it. You know it. I know it. Channel that anger into something you can work with and complete your sentence so you can get topside again. Isn't that what you want? You gave up your soul for a guy. Whatever hope she had left seemed to fade away, like Hades' infamous smoke. Who is she? Meg whispered. Come on. Hades looked sad. Doesn't matter. Tell me her name. Hades sighed. Katerina. Her name is Katerina. Katerina. Meg looked down at the flute in her hands and squeezed it till her fingers almost bled. Her mother had been right. The only person she could rely on was herself. Love is for fools, and she had been played for one. Meg felt a guttural sound and rage from her throat. She raised her hand and pitched the flute into the flames as Hades looked on in horror. Aggius was dead to her. It was time to get back to work. Meg looked at Hades. So tell me about that griffin.